Hi, Phonetics. Welcome to the show. If you could take a second to hit the like and download the podcast and give us 5-star reviews, really appreciate it. This is part 2 with John Dusenberry, story editor, artist at Warner Brothers, known for many fantastic stories like, oh my gosh, some things like, the Three Caballeros, Emmy Award-winning series Cosmos, A Spacetime Odyssey, and Space Jam, A New Legacy, and SCOOB, and Disney's DuckTales. Let's welcome back John Dusenberry.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, welcome back. We've just been having so much fun talking about you going to a party and your little brother spilling wine on white pantsuits of Ned, right?
Ned Beatty, yeah, true story.
Ned Beatty, yeah. What are some movies that he was in? Tell so that we can remind all our
Ned Beatty, he was in Deliverance, of course, and he was in the Superman movies. He played Lex Luthor's assistant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's such a great actor. He's been in a million things.
Ah, awesome. So you said your dad did music? Did you say that your dad did some music?
Yeah, so he writes music. He wrote musicals growing up. He actually produced musicals growing up. I think he put on 3, maybe 4 musicals. In the South Bay area, everywhere from the Beverly Hills Playhouse down to small little theater in Hermosa Beach. But yeah, so he wrote and he writes music. He writes music for film scores. He writes a lot of. I think he performed in a big band, jazz band, ever since high school. And I forget the name of the band, but they're in the Smithsonian Museum. He plays the trombone. And so his band in high school went on to play at Johnny Carson's house and, things like that. They were on TV. So yeah, he's an accomplished musician.
Oh, wow. He played for Johnny Carson. He's in the Smithsonian. He plays the trumpet. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so being musically inclined to play a musical instrument and to read music and to write it, that's really, that's very creative.
Yeah,
that's talent.
And he would write all the musicals too. Like he wrote the stories for it as well. So, like I said before, I kind of grew up adjacent to the film industry, and I had a lot of inspiration from different people. I think it was 3rd grade. I think I took one of his cousin's screenplays to look at the formatting. And then I wrote my own version. I think it was basically a ripoff of Back to the Future 3. So it's like Western, but I also set it in the future, and actually tried to get it produced. So it was in 3rd grade. I gathered all my friends and classmates, and then at recess I would hold auditions and then rehearsals. And I had this big plan to, I think it was over spring break, go out to my family's house in Palm Springs and actually try to film it. We were going to go out to the desert and shoot on location. But this other student, this peer, let's call her, decided to also start writing a screenplay, and slowly but surely stole away my entire cast until nobody showed up to my rehearsals. And suddenly the project was just dead in the water.
Oh, that little sneaky girl.
There was a very sad trip to Palm Springs with my parents where I was not making a movie. But that's Hollywood.
Sounds
like
my
first taste of Hollywood.
Swimming with sharks and piranhas.
Yes, in the 3rd grade.
Oh my gosh! Did she become a big producer?
She's dead now.
Oh
no, I don't know. No, I don't know. I have no idea where she went on.
She's dead to me.
I wish her nothing but the best.
She's dead to me.
She's dead to me. So that's where she stays. No,
okay,
I'm sure I hope she did go on.
Well,
if she had that amount of drive and ambition then, I really hope she did something with it, especially because she stole my direction.
Yes, she did. So, you went to CalArts, and
Yes.
which you made your amazing short films that you had to do yourself, which is very hard to do, like with no budget and by yourself. How long does it take you to draw a little film all by yourself?
Oh, like the entire semester. Well, there's 2 semesters, right? So the first semester is all the pre-planning, and if you're lucky, you can get into actually producing the work. But most people took a break over winter break, and they came back and wanted to, alter their story, which is always a big mistake because then you're working against the clock, which I did, I think, every year, and as most people did. Some people, though, got they got it right out of the bag, and they made these amazing films. They're just super dedicated. I went to school with guys like Alex Hirsch and Mike Rianda, who just did Mitchell's versus the Machines. So they were all there at the same time. There's a ton of others who have gone on to do great things, and a ton of others who essentially quit animation, or are just working some ordinary job in animation. It's the full gamut there, but everybody was just incredibly talented. So it was kind of intimidating to be around it, because your friends are your competition, but at the same time they're still your friends. So it's a strange dynamic, but it's all worked out. We've all gone on to do really good stuff.
Yeah, and so your forte is drawing, but your forte is writing.
Yeah, so I think I started writing. I mean, I always drew as a kid. Who doesn't draw as a little kid? And so I could draw, and I could draw well. But I did love writing first, and I think as a kid I actually wanted to be an actor at first. I think I was inspired by my dad's friends and such. But I also loved writing, so I kind of wanted to do both. So I wanted to be a screenwriter and an actor, and I wanted to star in my own stuff. And then I think even by the time I was in CalArts, I still wanted to be a live action film director. I think I was more inspired by guys like Tim Burton than I was people like Walt Disney. And so I kind of wanted to go that route. And even to this day, I still prefer writing. I still prefer books over movies. I actually got hooked up with one of my story mentors while I was at CalArts, who's gone on to create this website that teaches people story structure, and we've created an app that can help you outline your story, so that you make sure that your story stays on the rails and it has meaning and the characters are rich and you're telling multiple perspectives. And so I've really delved pretty deep into that. And I think over the years, I think that's probably my strongest suit, is like the story structure of it all. But I can also then actually enact it. I can also write it out and draw it. So having a job like the head of story was kind of a no-brainer for me. It was just a matter of convincing the studio to let me do it. But it turned out well, and they loved what we did. I'm sure there's more projects on the horizon, some that I can't quite mention yet, but yeah, good things are coming.
Yeah. So you graduated from CalArts, and then you took this, you said, at a smaller little studio, this
Right.
2D project.
There's a lot of small studios, a lot of 2D projects. I worked on the Ricky Gervais show, was one of them.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, a project called Wild Brain, it was a fun project because it wasn't a straight series. It was actually taking his podcast, which was already done, editing it, and then bringing it to life through animation. So a lot of it was like sitting like we are now, them talking, but just animated. And then it would cut to clips of what they're talking about. But I worked on that, and then I worked for another studio doing stuff for MTV, doing stuff. There's a lot of the larger studios like DreamWorks and Sony that would come to these little boutique shops because they could do the work for a lower rate. And so we got to work on projects, like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Me and My Shadow, which ultimately got canceled, and Kung Fu Panda. And, all these big name properties would come through. We would do, whether it was credit animation, whether it was a little bit of a movie, like we did a SpongeBob movie. We did a whole sequence at the end of the film, which was all 2D animated, and we did the credits, like little characters moving around the screen and stuff like that. But then at the end of my time at this one studio, they got into doing larger projects. They teamed up with Fox Animation and Cosmos, the Carl Sagan company, that when he had that old show in the 1970s. And that was really probably their biggest thing that had come through there. At the same time, or just before it, I think Tom Hanks came by, and he was doing something called Electric City, I believe it was, which could have been huge. It was really great, super ambitious.
So we're talking with John Dusenberry. Oh yeah, and we lost you a little bit because of the Wi-Fi. So you just were talking about Tom Hanks came by, and
okay, yeah. I'll pick up there. So Tom Hanks, we were working on this project called Electric City, and at the wrap party, he got this truck to come by, the In-N-Out truck, and it was just free In-N-Out burgers and fries, whatever he needed the whole night. It was really nice. And, there was a lot of big people who came by who were attached to this project or that. So it's not that you have to be at these big studios to really get a fun experience and to meet people. A lot of these small places are a good place to start, and you kind of cut your teeth and you get your feet wet, or whatever you want to call it, with admittedly less pressure because you're not working for these major studios. So I think it was a good way to come up in the industry. And I definitely gained speed and versatility working at these smaller places, where I've seen people get hired away at Pixar right away after their first year at CalArts, and I kind of never hear from them again. I assume they're doing something, and I assume they're doing well, but you kind of just fade into obscurity sometimes, which is, I'm sure they're fine. They're happy doing what they're doing. But I've heard people complain about plateauing at these big studios, just getting lifted up too high too quick.
Oh, because they don't really have any experience, even though they're great.
I guess that's it. I guess it is. I don't know if it's like if they become complacent or they just didn't have to get thrown to the sharks. I don't know what it is exactly, but yeah, this is. I remember one of these guys at Pixar, Mark Andrews. He kind of foretold this advice. He's like, don't worry if you don't get hired from us at Pixar or Disney or wherever. He's like, you're going to end up somewhere, and there's going to be a lot of dirt sandwiches. So I don't think he used the word dirt, but he's like, just eat those dirt sandwiches and enjoy them, because they are going to build character, and you're going to be much more proficient than the peers who got plucked up these higher positions. So as much as I would have loved to have gotten hired from Disney Studios my freshman year at CalArts, I'm kind of glad I didn't. I guess, I don't know. Can't change it now.
Yeah. So from those little jobs that then what was your next step? What was your first did you go to Warner Brothers right away?
Well, so the Cosmos series, I was directing animation on that, and it was the first real big major project I think that I had been in a fairly high level position on, and that eventually led to, like I said, we worked on that SpongeBob movie. So I was directing animation as opposed. I mean, I was still doing animation, but I was really got a taste of leadership on various big projects like that. And then the Three Caballeros show came along. That was brought over from Disney to this little small shop, and they needed storyboard artists. And I had some experience doing storyboarding. And of course, we did it at CalArts, and I had done a little bit at the studio. But I really just kind of knocked on the CEO's door, and I was like, "Hey, I would like to storyboard on this show." And we had a conversation about it, and eventually, he made it happen.
Nice.
So that was my first real big storyboarding experience on a big show like that. And at the time, this was just before Disney Plus came out. I don't even think they were calling it that yet. And this was going to be the flagship show to kick off that new app. But I think in the time we were making it, they must have bought Star Wars or Marvel or both. And they quickly realized, we can't just kick off this series with a show about Donald Duck. This is going to be huge. So our project actually got shelved for 3 years after it was done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, but during that time, the showrunner, this guy, Matt Danner, who's gone on to do Muppet Babies, he works for Imagineering, places like that. He recommended a handful of us to his friend over at Warner Brothers, who was starting up a new movie. He couldn't tell us anything else about it. He's like, just go here, go to this location, and talk to Tony. It sounded like, some shady backdoor deal, but I was like, okay. And I get there, and there's like a trailer on the back lot. I'm like, this can't be right. This is like a trailer. It's like right behind all the little fake, little fake town that they have there. And I walk in, and I see all this artwork for Scooby-Doo everywhere. And I see a little statue, like a maquette of Scooby-Doo. And I was like, oh, this is like a Scooby-Doo movie? Like another one, animated? And sure enough, it was. So I met Tony Cervoni and Alison Abate, who just stepped down from Warner Brothers. And they were running this new movie. So that was my first step into the feature world at a large studio, I should say. And it was a fun experience. And I think we ended up making 2 versions of that movie because there was different showrunners, and we made one version. We put it all up on reels from start to finish, and it just didn't connect with the studio. I don't think it was quite on brand for what they wanted. And there was also a change in leadership at the time, so they shelved it. And then, I was worried that okay, this is it. This is my one step into feature, and the movie's canned, so that's it. But the studio liked my work enough that they ended up putting me on other projects. So I got to work on Smallfoot, the Lego movies, and I did some development on Space Jam, like way before it was actually going to be made. So it was a good opportunity there to grow. And then I think one of my old friends from CalArts, Sean Jimenez, he was, I think, art directing on the new DuckTales show over at Walt Disney. And we had worked together at this small boutique shop on I think it was a personal project of his called Radlands, which is super cool. And so he liked my work on that and asked me to come do animation on the new DuckTales show. So I was doing animation on DuckTales at the same time that I was doing storyboarding work at the Warner Brothers studio. And so, yeah, I carried that on for what, 4 years doing those two things in tandem together. And eventually just, climbing up the ladder at Warner Brothers until this last show I was the head of story on, which is, that's the person who's like in charge of all the story artists basically. And you work hand in hand with the producers and directors to help craft the story, which as a storyboard artist, you typically don't really get much of a say. But once you're in that sort of leadership position, you can. I think we really made something great with this one. And it's a shame that nobody's going to see it for a while.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, you did get to work on the Emmy Award winning series Cosmos and
Yes.
Spacetime Odyssey.
Yeah. Did I mention that one? Yeah, Cosmos.
Do you want to share a little bit about that one and tell us about this?
It was a really cool experience. Yeah. Working on Cosmos. So I was a huge Carl Sagan fan. So when I heard about the show, I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure I pushed to be in some sort of leadership position there. They might have offered it to me, but I quickly accepted and was like, hell yes. Are you kidding me? And it was really cool. We got to work with Fox. So there's a couple of creative leads from Fox that came over. People who had worked on Family Guy show and American Dad.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, and so they were kind of our showrunners. But at the same time, we had the showrunners from Cosmos, which was Carl Sagan's widow. And then we had our boutique shop and that leadership. So it was this big mixing pot of conflicting directions a lot of the time.
Oh.
Yeah, and so, only two of those sets of leadership really knew anything about animation. And Andrea, and she just knew about, Cosmos and science and the history of all the characters that we were bringing to life. I never got to work with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I can't remember. I don't think he was at the wrap party. I think we got Bill Nye to show up instead, which was great. And I got to meet him, and he was really nice. He would stop and chat. I forget if I got to get an autograph or a picture or something. I think I have a picture with me and one of the other animation directors on the show. But that was a really fun show to work on, despite all the challenges we went through. One of which was having to redo the animation in the 11th hour for the entire episode, because we didn't realize that one of the characters in the show, and of course it was the episode that was, because it was a combination of live action, computer animation, and then 2D animations. We did the 2D animation parts. And this episode was mostly 2D animation, like 90% 2D animation. And our main character should have gone through more costume changes and more age updates than we designed him to do. So when Andrea eventually saw the episode, she was like, oh, well, this is all wrong. Like, he has to be wearing more tattered clothes here, and he'd have a nicer suit there, and his hair would be different here. And so we had to go back using Flash animation, which, if anybody knows Flash animation, it is impossible to revise anything in Flash.
Oh, wow.
And redo, in many cases, complicated animation, basically redo the shot in a very narrow amount of time. But she made up for it at the wrap party by giving the most heartfelt speech I've ever heard in my life. She was waxing on about Carl and how much she missed him, the legacy of what he's left behind in this show, and the aspirations that we had of trying to match what he did and bringing it to the modern audience. And she had some analogy, I forget the details, but it's something to do with Carl was like her moon or something like that. And so we had it on the top of the W Hotel here in Los Angeles. And so there's a beautiful scene. She was giving this heartfelt speech. And then she like points up to the moon and blows a kiss. And says, I love you, Carl. I miss you. And all of us were just weeping after this event. It was just this cosmic event, if you'll excuse the pun. It was an incredible story, and all of us were brought to tears. And it was I think that was my favorite project that I've ever worked on for so many different reasons.
Wow. So you just you moved right up there. So can you share anything that what you're working on now, or?
I think they've announced that they're working on a Flintstones movie, and so I'm helping out with that. Just doing some story work on that. But there's some other projects that I don't think are announced yet, that I am in talks to again do a leadership position on. I guess that's all I can say for right now.
Okay.
But more, there's a couple known IPs that for now Warner Brothers owns before they slash and burn and sell them off. And then there's an original IP that might be coming out. And then beyond that, though, I still do all the story mentorship stuff. So if anybody heads over to narrativefirst.com, you can find our app there. You can find my story classes there. And I think there's links to my website, which is thegreatstoriesmatter.com, where I teach story structure, and I give private lessons to people working on their own stories. I just got off with a client earlier today, actually. This is like a screenwriter who actually, ironically, has ties to Walt Disney. His grandfather was the copywriter for Roy Disney back in from the 1950s something to 1971. Had an office right next to Walt and Roy back in the day.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, it's funny how those things. It's a really small world out there.
I want to just make sure that everyone heard. So you teach a weekly story workshop, and you offer story coaching and consultation, which is a certified dramatic story expert, and through Narrative First. So can you Can you say the name of the app that they can go to if they're listening?
The app is Subtext with no E, so SUBTXT, and it was developed mostly by my story mentor from CalArts, Jim Hull, who started as a Disney animator, and then he moved over to DreamWorks, and he got to the animation industry there, and he was also, I think he even worked in the story department there. But this is really his passion project. And so he, after CalArts, at the same time I was doing those two jobs and all the others, I was in a mentorship program with him, which was, furthering my knowledge of story structure, and he really took me under his wing. And it got to the point where, it was like the student has become the master. I started teaching classes for him through his website. So he has a whole mentorship program. He has different cohorts that he teaches. And so I teach a weekly workshop there called Conflict Corner. And so we get into story structure and kind of how to build a narrative, just take you through the whole process from start to finish. People get to ask questions, and then there's a Discord you can follow up and chat with me there. And eventually over the years that led to me starting my own website, offering my own private consulting. So you can check both of those out if you like.
And what's the website again?
Narrativefirst.com.
Narrativefirst.com. And then you'll send me that, and I'll put the link. I'll copy and paste and send it in there. So and so is there any other fun stories you want to tell us that you worked on?
Well, let's see. Fun stories that I worked on. No, there was some. Trying to think of the different projects I've been on over the years.
DuckTales. You told us a little bit about DuckTales.
DuckTales was fun. That was probably the most straightforward job, as far as fun stuff at the studios. This latest project, because it was such a small film, the latest SCOOB project, I got to help out sort of like in the brain trust that ran the film, and so we were under such a tight deadline that we didn't really have things ready a lot of the time. By the time we got to recording the voice actors, so on this film, I think I got to rub elbows with the most voice talent, and being the head of story, a lot of the times all we had was my storyboard. So I was kind of forced to sit in on the recording sessions, and this is pretty atypical, and pitch them the scene so they could see what the scene was, because there was kind of a script sometimes, and kind of there was other things on the boards that weren't in the script. And so I was able to help direct some of these people like Mark Hamill and Ming-Na Wen and Michael McKeon, Ian Armitage, who plays the young Sheldon character. All sorts of really great people. McKenna Grace, Cristo Fernandez from Ted Lasso.
Nice.
And so, yeah, it was, it was great to like work with these people, with them, and hear their stories. I think at the Brat Party, Ian Armitage was kind enough to make an appearance, and we were taking a group photo, and then this praying mantis starts crawling up his back, and I was like behind him, and I was like, Ian, there's and he felt it, and just like karate chop, grabbed it, squished it, threw it to the bushes. I was like, mantis on your shoulder. And so we had a little fun, like talking about fighting praying mantis, using different styles of kung fu or whatever against it. And then we were both paranoid for the rest of the day, like looking in the trees for mantises that were going to jump on us. But it was great to get to know these people a bit, and hear their stories. They're all such great characters, and great character actors. We got to work with Luke Skywalker. It was a bit of a dream come true. We're all a little starstruck.
Wow. You got to work with Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, it was a dream come true. We were all, and we were told, of course, like, don't mention Star Wars, don't mention this and that. Just treat him as usual. But this one day, we were recording him, and my director, there was a scene where his character is dying, and it's dying in this very specific way that, in my director's mind, the only way he could describe it, he was like, do you remember when you're holding Darth Vader and you take off his helmet and he's talking to you? And it was the big faux pas, but we're not supposed to mention. And but to Mark, he was like, huh? What part? And then we had to describe the scene, and he was like, oh yeah, of course, yeah. He's like, guys, you got to understand, like, for you, that is iconic, Darth Vader being unmasked. For me, it was Tuesday. He's like, it was one day of shooting amongst, hundreds of days of shooting. And how many films have I done now? He's like, I legitimately don't fully remember doing that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's really fun to get that sort of perspective on things that to the audience are so iconic. So it was a good experience on that film. I think that was the most star-filled occasion that I've been part of.
Yeah, so we might see some of your work on Scooby-Doo Holiday Haunt
I hope
if
you
it
do.
ever
Yeah.
comes out. But if not, you've got the Flintstones coming and some secret
Flintstones are
projects.
coming. Yep.
So where can our audience keep up with you? Do you have TikTok, Instagram, or any social media?
Yeah, I just on this last thing started a Twitter account on the last film. I'm on Instagram, but it's just my personal account. But if you guys are interested in seeing me go on vacation with my kids, yeah, drop a line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say find me on Twitter. I think it's at Dusenberry John or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we had just a ball having you on the show today, and I hope
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you have new fans from around the world enjoying what you do on Warner Brothers. And just thank you so much, John Dusenberry. Looking forward to all of the new stuff that you're working at Warner Brothers as story editor, artist, and writer. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.